Right now on Headline Humboldt, we go to the epicenter of an Arcata firestorm. Plus, Humboldt County searches for new leadership while living with COVID. Live from the top of Humboldt Hill, this is Headline Humboldt. Filling in for James Falk, I'm Eric Black. What do you think about Arcata Skyscrapers? Yeah, this is actually a thing. Last month, city planners released a draft plan to rezone 64 square blocks of industrial land west of the plaza. Tuesday, planning commissioners debated the proposal to allow up to 8-story, 90-foot-tall buildings in part of the Arcata Gateway.
It blocks the sunlight from the houses. It blocks the green spaces. There's a lot of noise and echoing, all the shade, which is terrible this time of year. It's freezing when you have buildings on either side of you. I'm just not crazy about the vast multi-story housing. This was the original plan, and all along, and despite public input, it just has never changed. It's always been the same.
It's important that if people want to come out and say that they're opposed to taller buildings in Arcata, that they should also be willing to say that they're for sprawl out into the green area around Arcata, because I simply don't see how we're possibly going to hit the kind of housing increase that we need without doing one or the other.
I feel like liberals in the community have really helped exacerbate housing crisis for working families, and that Arcata needs to do its share, not just for low-income people, but also for working families.
Working families could relocate to the Gateway. It stretches from roughly K Street west to Q Street and from Samoa Boulevard north to 16th Street. The city's top planner explained how city infrastructure will accommodate the Gateway's up to 3,500 units of planned growth.
There's going to be much less actual built over the 20-year plan period than 3,500 units. That would just be an incredible population growth. Growth at some point will trigger the need for new fire services, new police services, new wastewater treatment services. The size of the infrastructure, the types of infrastructure needs are highly dependent on the size of the community that's planned. And so to plan the infrastructure and present that in this document before we've even had the community conversation about how high are the buildings going to be, how dense are the buildings going to be, what are the land use restrictions going to be, would be putting the cart before the horse.
David Loya created the Gateway Plan. As the city's chief planner, Loya shapes Arcata's future by translating the city council's vision into land use regulations. But Loya's critics say he usurps power from Arcata's compliant elected leaders. For example, they say Loya is ramming through his Pollyannish vision to marginalize cars. Loya responded.
I think a lot of people have heard us say this plan de-emphasizes, parking. They've translated into the city isn't providing any parking. This plan is not going to eliminate parking or people using cars. We're not intending to provide one parking space for every unit, recognizing that for every parking space, you're taking away some housing. And so that policy balancing, do we want to make sure that everybody has a free place to park, or do we want to make sure that there's places for people to live? The council and the commission has historically come down, and we've created this plan based on direction that we want to have places for people to live.
Right now we're talking parking, building heights, housing, infrastructure, and all things Gateway with Arcata Senior Planner, Delo Freitas. What's up?
Not much, just happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, welcome to Headline Humboldt. So we have this Arcata Gateway Plan, and why do we need this new plan? Why are we doing something new? What's wrong with what's already occurring in the Gateway?
Yeah, that's a great question. I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with what's currently occurring, but there is a lot of potential that isn't realized yet. There are a lot of vacant parcels, underutilized parcels, and it's so close to Arcata's downtown. It's a quarter-mile walking distance from a lot of amenities, shops. The university is also very close, so it's a wonderful area to expand sort of the energy and dynamism of the plaza west into a new part of town.
So this area is going to be zoned mixed use. What does mixed use mean, and how does that look in the Gateway?
Yeah, great question. So mixed use essentially means that we aren't segregating land use into one particular bucket, but instead having more options so people can, live, work, and play in one area. So, for example, we are broadcasting out of the KEET office at the top of Humboldt Hill. Humboldt Hill is a fantastic example of a very segregated land use. There's nothing around here except for homes. So if you wanted to go down to the grocery store or get a bite to eat or go to your job, you'd have to hike all the way down the hill to get it. But we are re-envisioning this part of town as connecting to the broader Arcata downtown and creating more jobs, creating more housing, creating more opportunity for business, so that way we can have all of it in one place and really encourage that car-free lifestyle that we are trying to move towards.
So when we talk about mixed use, instead of all these just homes after homes after homes, the way it is here at the top of Humboldt Hill and in suburbs throughout the United States.
Not that there's anything wrong with that necessarily, right? It's just not what we're going for in Arcata at this moment.
So what would be, let's say we're looking at one block, what's the vision of what is going on in that one block?
Yeah, so paint a picture in your mind, right? Larger buildings than one story, most likely. Probably ground floor commercial or a restaurant. You walk in, there's outdoor seating, you're able to meet a friend, and then above the first floor maybe it's office, maybe it's residential, maybe it's a yoga studio like they have at the top of the Creamery District building right now. So the intent is to have a mix of uses of all different types and really encourage vibrancy on the street.
And you said that this plan will create an environment that is conducive to a car-free lifestyle. Why? How is that?
Well, if you're able to, especially with teleworking now, but if you're able to live close to where you work and close to where you want to get your groceries, you're able to do all of that without having to get in your car. So for example, Arcata City Hall is really wonderfully located close to the plaza, close to Safeway, close to HealthSport. So I live in Eureka, I have to drive in, or I could take the bus. But once I'm there, I can do my grocery shopping on my lunch hour. I can meet my friends for lunch. I can go and do my shopping and get my cards for my mom's birthday right up the street, and I don't have to get in my car at all.
So in order to create an environment where people are walking around a lot and let's say maybe skateboarding or rollerblading or cycling, does the city's current infrastructure accommodate that sort of transportation choices?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. And Arcata has a really strong legacy of prioritizing people and human-centered modes of transportation throughout the city. And in fact, it's even in our vision statement, which we are updating now, to essentially put people before cars. And we have invested for decades infrastructure through the core downtown, and infill is actually a policy priority that multiple decades of city councils and planning commissions have prioritized. And the intent of that infill is using your existing infrastructure to the extent that you can. And the nice thing right now in our current state climate is that if you do prioritize infill and densify your downtown, there tends to be money from the state to sort of sweeten the pot for jurisdictions. So for example, our Isaacson's project, also known as Sorrel Place, we are getting all new infrastructure around that development and an all new electric bus because of that project and the funding associated with it.
And in the city's presentations, in order to accommodate active transportation, which is moving around in ways that is not based on a car, the city is flashing all these kind of diagrams and models of changes to K and L Street, which is a main connector in Arcata.
Yeah.
So what does that look like?
Well, what it would look like is essentially a couplet with, instead of 2 lanes of traffic on K and a bike lane, basically a segregated bike lane on L, which wasn't always that way, but it has translated into that in the last few years, which is a fabulous project and people do love it. I use it all the time. It would instead, over time, and this would not be immediately, but over time, if the demand does increase in that area and it becomes more congested, it would be 1 lane of traffic on K, 1 lane of traffic on L, and then bike lanes on both to allow for more pedestrian and bike traffic on both streets. So K Street would essentially become safer for pedestrians and bikes. L Street would see more cars than it sees now.
So the businesses that don't fit into the vision of what is going to be happening in the Gateway Plan, there are a bunch of them. These are called non-conforming uses. What is a non-conforming use in general terms, and what are examples of non-conforming uses that currently exist in the Gateway?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think it's definitely a source of confusion for people, so I appreciate you asking. A non-conforming use essentially means something that doesn't conform to a rule. So in this case, a non-conforming use would be something that isn't specifically principally permitted in the zone. So a non-conforming use in Humboldt Hill would be maybe like a legacy restaurant that was surrounded by residential uses, right? But the good thing about changing the zoning to a mixed-use district is that there will not actually be that many types of businesses that will be non-conforming. And non-conforming doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're going to be kicked out. We're not taking anybody's property. It's actually legal non-conforming instead of just conforming, and that's a really important part of that term, because if you're legal non-conforming, it means you can continue to operate for as long as you want to. It's your choice as the property owner or the business owner to choose when to sell that property. But then the intent of that non-conformity would be if and when that current use does essentially terminate, then other things can kind of come in and grow in its place that are more in line with the current vision.
So I've heard planners talk about storage companies, gas companies that are non-conforming in the Gateway. I talked to an auto shop owner who...
There are a few of those, yep.
Yep. And he was telling me that the Gateway Plan is really bad for him because he is not going to be able to sell his business to someone else because it is legal non-conforming for him, but he can't sell it to someone else. And in addition, he talked to an engineer who said the building that he built on his property to house his auto shop, that building cannot support building on top of it. You can't put apartments above his building. So when he goes to retire and sell that property in that building, the next person's going to want to put apartments in accordance with this plan, but they're going to have to demolish that building. So what he thought was an asset that he was building is actually now a liability, and it's going to degrade the value of his retirement. So what can the city provide someone like that?
Yeah, so I feel bad for this poor man. So he will not be in any way required to sell his property at less cost. If they're interested people who want to come and operate an auto repair shop, they can do so. He can sell to anyone who he wants to as long as they continue the use without letting it lapse for 12 months, I believe, is the amount of time. So he'll be under no obligation to sell his property at less cost or in any way affect his livelihood. In terms of whether or not he could demolish it and construct apartments in the future, it seems like if anything that could improve the cost of the land, even if it didn't, it was kind of value neutral on the cost of the business. And in terms of the site-specific soil composition, it's really hard to say. I would have to have more information on the particular site. But that being said, I think that there would be potential to do a few stories, even if it isn't 8. Isaacson's is an example of a moderate liquefaction site where they were able to engineer something that was completely safe. And this plan will have no impact on California building code or California environmental regulations. That's not something we have control over. All we're trying to do is reduce barriers to the extent that we can at a local level, but we're still going to do everything that we are legally required to do to keep residents safe.
And let's clarify a point. When we talk about allowing 8-story, 90-foot tall buildings, we're talking about zoning for that possibility. We're not talking about the city of Arcata building those buildings. We're talking about the city of Arcata allowing developers who want to make money to build those buildings.
That's correct. Yeah, the city is not a developer. Pretty much what we are in control over at the local level as planning department is regulating use and regulating building form. So we are creating allowances for these buildings to be constructed, but we're not going out in our hard hats, constructing buildings. That's not part of our job.
But people are pretty annoyed about this idea of the potential of 8 stories. Now that would just be in one part of the gateway, just north of Samoa Boulevard in the area that's currently anchored by wing inflatables. But in other parts of the gateway, there would be a 7-story and a 6-story and a 5-story. And people already think Isaacson Sorrell Place is a huge building. Oh my God, this is terrible.
Not everybody loves it, that's a fact.
And we're talking about buildings that are much bigger.
Yeah.
Why is the city proposing to allow such large buildings?
Yeah, so that's a good question, and I think it really comes back to, again, this really long-standing policy that Arcata has of encouraging infill development. And we have a very, very limited land base. We are, surrounded by so much natural beauty, and we've heard time and time again, that's what people love about Arcata, is the ocean and the forest and our hardworking agricultural lands. And this is an area where we can accommodate a lot of future growth, and that is something that we really need to be planning for, especially with the Polytechnic, to drop the Polytechnic bomb. We have a lot of people coming in, and that's just one piece of a larger puzzle of changing demographics and people who want to be here. And when we have limited land, we need to be strategic. And I think it's also important to note that 8 stories is pretty much the very, very top height that we could put forward in good faith and say this is feasible for this community. We know it's tall, and ultimately we will be having to work with the community and the council to balance policy priorities. I don't think anybody out there is really jazzed about the aesthetics of the 8-story building. What they care about, if they're supportive of it, is the housing that it could create and the resources that it could protect.
We heard David Loya talk a little bit about parking. What is the vision for accommodating all of the cars that are going to come with all these people? Yeah,
well, it kind of gets back to what we were talking about with encouraging a car-free lifestyle, right? We're not going to tell people you can't bring your car, but we are going to do what we can to encourage them to be able to ride their bike, to walk, to take the bus, and particularly we've heard that people love how walkable Arcata is. And so we are trying to use that strength to our advantage, and it may mean that there is more congestion and less parking in the district than there is now. But I think we'd have to go a pretty long ways before it was significantly more challenging to park in the district. And I think that's something that people are not always understanding, is how long-term of a plan this is. This is 20 years or more that we're talking about, and these things don't happen overnight. And to see that kind of growth is going to take years.
You mentioned before pieces of a demographic puzzle as far as people coming and living in Arcata. What are the other pieces of that puzzle?
Yeah, well, California is a big state, and there are a lot of people that want to live in Arcata. Especially as our climate continues to change. We're seeing a lot of fire refugees, for one thing, and with COVID, a lot of people are leaving cities because they want to have a little bit more space and a little bit more quiet, and they are looking to areas like Arcata. And if we aren't careful and guiding that growth, we'll have a true affordability crisis as well as a housing crisis as people who are from here get priced out.
I heard someone say, I forgot the exact quote, but the tall buildings will essentially turn Arcata into a Santa Cruz, and it will rip the heart out of the city.
Ooh, that's
powerful.
Yeah, that is powerful.
Are we changing the character of Arcata by urbanizing so quickly and so intensely?
Well, a couple things to unpack there. First of all, like I said, I don't think it really will be that quick. This is a plan, it's not the actual reality of it, and we'll see what people ultimately come forward wanting to develop. But it is intense. What we're allowing for could definitely be intense. But it would be one part of town that people probably are going to some people might be frustrated with me for saying this, but it doesn't have a super well-developed character as an entire area. The Creamery District has done a fabulous job of revitalizing the area and creating that sense of place and that pride of place. But we want to expand that and create a new character throughout the district while retaining the character of some of the other neighborhoods that are so valuable to the sense of Arcata as a historic, walkable area.
For people who have opinions on this subject, where are we in the kind of public input process, the decision-making process, and how can they kind of tell city officials what they think about it?
Yeah, this is a really, really good time to be paying attention and to get involved. We have released the plan. It was released December 1st of last year. And over the next couple of months, we will be doing pretty targeted engagement. We're doing an open house on the 21st and 22nd, which will be an opportunity to come and engage with our materials and talk one-on-one with planners such as myself and my boss, David. But we are trying to do it in a way that's COVID safe. So please, wear your mask and plan to distance from others. We also are going back to some of the committees and commissions in the city and going through some of the subjects within the plan with them, Creeks and Wetlands Committee, Historic Landmarks Committee are reviewing the plan as well. So in the next couple of months, we'll really be trying to collect as much information as we can to present to the council, and they will be the ones who will ultimately make the decision about how we move forward. So definitely now is the time.
And my last question for you is, we pass this plan, it becomes law. In 20 years from now, which is the time frame of the plan, how will Arcata look and feel different than it does now?
I think a lot of places in Arcata will probably look and feel the same. And, the way we interact will be unchanged in some areas. And in areas like the Gateway, we're hoping to make it a really dynamic, fun place to be where you can connect to the marsh and connect to the downtown and really make a life in Arcata.
So we've got that open house coming up on January 21st and 22nd at the community center. That's all day with city officials. Mm-hmm. That's this Friday and this Saturday, so I guess we'll see you there. Mm-hmm. All right, Delo Freitas is a senior planner with Arcata, and she helped work on the Arcata Gateway plan. We're back after the break.
Boston, a city I've always loved. Big-time developers, luxury residential units.
A city that is changing rapidly. Very large machine to displace and move out residents.
7 years ago, I ended up at a homeless shelter.
These people are evicted. Where will they go?
This film is bearing down on me. Maybe other white people need to admit there have been times when they've been silent too.
Government orchestrated inside job. Powerful world government.
He just kept adding more and more outrageous lies to the story.
Roger delivers legitimacy to Alex Jones, and Jones delivers to Trump, a disaffected voter.
Donald Trump is our guest.
I will not let you down.
Now those ideas, which used to be on the fringe, are in the mainstream.
Conspiratorial thinking is a feature of this president.
The man leading Humboldt's COVID response has resigned. Ryan Hutson reports.
2 years into the COVID-19 pandemic, Humboldt County is now seeking its third public health officer after Dr. Ian Hoffman announced his resignation to the Board of Supervisors. Dr. Hoffman has held the position for 13 months, having taken over for Frankovich. Hindsight, of course, being 2020, Frankovich offered advice on her way out.
I have found out the hard way that the fastest way to learn what is at the core of your new community is to face a pandemic together. I don't recommend this approach. And as hard and exhausting as this has been, I would do it all again because it has been a privilege to be able to do important work and to do it alongside and on behalf of the people I deeply respect and admire.
We have all the tools to do this. It feels less like a emergency drill now, and like we've done this many times. So I am confident that this county and this community can come together to try to mitigate this. And lastly, an update to you, the board and the community. in follow-up to a letter that I sent you all last night, I just want to offer my greatest appreciation for the last 13 months as I offer my resignation from the post as health officer for Humboldt County. It's a very difficult decision that I've had to come to over the course of the last month or so. This job has offered me tremendous satisfaction working with each and every one of you, all the folks here at Public Health and DHHS. It's an unbelievable group of people. Again, I don't take it lightly. I really have enjoyed every moment working with each of you, even some of the hardest times together. I took another position that will allow me to be with my family more. And I'm hopeful that, can continue to do work in public health as well as a clinical role, going back to a clinical role that I've, had up until this point of being health officer for the last 13 months.
Humboldt's new health officer is expected to start the job on March 4th. So far, no official word on who will be the replacement for Dr. Hoffman, but with any luck, they will see the county through its transition back to normalcy. Ryan Hutson for Headline Humboldt.
In the most controversial decision of his tenure, last summer, Hoffman reinstituted universal indoor mask requirements. Experts disagree on whether cloth masks reduce the spread of the virus. Brett Watson says the city of Arcata is retaliating against him for doing his job. The city council member responded to City Hall's investigation into allegations of discrimination and harassment against him. Watson said, quote, "I fear that these allegations are motivated by my continued efforts to hold city staff accountable with timely answers to my questions on behalf of my constituents." Watson said he has not been informed what he allegedly did, nor of the identity of his alleged victim. Progressives have inched closer to securing a majority on the Humboldt County Board of Supervisors. Last week, incumbent traditionalist Virginia Bass announced she would not seek a fourth term. Progressive Eureka City Council members Natalie Arroyo and Kim Burgell are now the only candidates running to succeed Bass. Burgell will kick off her campaign Thursday in Old Town Eureka. Either Arroyo or Burgell would form a majority progressive board along with Supervisors Steve Madrone and Mike Wilson. Additional candidates can enter that race until March 16th. Hey, have a good week. We're back next Friday night at 7 o'clock for another episode of Headline Humboldt. Until then, stay tuned, stay informed.